Statement of Jude Perry regarding some advice. Recorded direct from subject, April 24th, 2017. Statement begins.
If you smother a flame, it dies. The only way it grows and flourishes is if you feed it. It's about making sure you find enough fuel for it, and not caring where it comes from. If you spend your time hiding and fretting about who you hurt, you'll sputter, and you'll die as surely as any candle. Don't be afraid to burn. The pain is sensational. You feel your flesh cooking, your nerves screaming out as they die exquisitely. Your whole body changes texture as you become that which feeds the fire. And in that agonizing, beautiful transformation, you can feel it ignite again and again and again. At least, that's how it feels for me. I don't know how it would feel for you. Maybe you get an itchy eye. I don't care. Point is, whatever form it takes, you have to feed it for it to grow strong. Otherwise, you're the one that gets consumed. I never hid my flame, not once. Even before I found my God, I burned as bright as I liked, and those who came too close simply ended up fueling my brilliance. At the time, the closest thing I had to God was cocaine, though I also spent my evenings as an acolyte to alcohol. But my true thrill was money. Not mine, of course, though I had plenty, but the money of others I could fling upon the pyre of the stock market. Whether it ignited into something more or simply burned down to ash meant nothing to me. It was the thrill that I craved. This was decades ago now. I was one of the top bankers for... It doesn't matter, they're not important. Not to mention that a series of severe fires has long since put them out of business. The point was that I burned through too much of myself because I didn't know what else I could burn. My girlfriend saw it, though she had no idea how to help with the deep depression that had settled over me. I never slept much to begin with, but now even the choice seemed denied to me. I was sluggish and listless at work, and people began to notice. My rating began to drop. My colleagues would whisper and, not so subtly, leave me off invitations for what little socializing there was. I was burnt out in every sense but one, and that was the one that saved me. It was Agnes, of course. I don't know where she found me. I only remember sitting in a booth with a beautiful young woman who smelled like matches and incense. I was drinking coffee so hot it peeled the skin from the roof of my mouth. But I didn't care, because looking at her filled me with every kind of heat. We were talking about sacrifice, about power, about things that even now I struggle to fully understand. She was soft-spoken and shy, and I gradually became aware of other people stood around us. There seemed nothing remarkable about them at first. Different clothes, different ages, just a dozen or so unremarkable strangers. There was something in their faces, though, a vicious hunger that I knew mirrored my own, and they all looked at Agnes with such devotion. One of them, a round-faced black woman I'd later know as Sandy, squatted down next to me and stared into my face. She made a noise of dismissal and leaned in close to stare at me. She said, "I don't think so," and her breath hit me like a furnace. I instinctively thrust out a hand to push her away, but as I touched her face, she remained still, and instead my hand sank into it like softened candle wax. I screamed, but if anyone heard me, they didn't do anything. I could only stare as thick rivulets of molten flesh flowed down my arm and onto the ground, and Sandy's body shook as though with laughter, even as my hands stayed encased in her warped and yielding head. I probably don't need to describe how much it hurt. It would be a long time before I was able to use the hand again. At last I calmed down enough to pull my scalded, wax-encrusted hand from her head. She stood up, pressed her fingers to her face, and calmly squeezed it back into shape. It didn't look exactly the same as before, though there was no mistaking the voice that came from her lips. She turned to Agnes and nodded her approval. Agnes, for her part, had been talking this entire time, I realized, and somehow I had been listening. I knew what to do. Nicholas Tregenza was the one that I chose. I had other colleagues I hated far more, of course, and in many ways I might have even called Nick a friend, but unlike so many of the others, he had a lot to live for. His wife, Julie, had just given birth to a squalling brat that he'd named Desmond. Awful name for a baby. And he'd saved enough money to move away from London entirely. He'd just bought a house. When he spoke to me, he had hope in his face. And so much life in him, it still makes me smile to think about it. I invited him out for a drink to celebrate his good fortune, got him drunk, and stabbed him to death in a filthy alleyway near the edge of the Docklands. He didn't even have the wherewithal to look surprised. His skin didn't yield as easily as Sandy's had, but I suppose that's what knives are for, isn't it? And just like that, he was dead. And I felt no different. I had a minute of blind panic. How could I have been such an idiot? I hadn't even planned ahead to consider how I might dump the body. I was just so desperate to stoke the fire. I still felt sputtering inside me. Then, all at once, I saw the faintest tongues of smoke creeping around his body. In an instant, it was burning, and I was surrounded by that smell of matches and incense, mixed with an oily smell like cooking pork. And as he burned, I felt my senses sharpen. My limbs were alive with searing energy, and my heart was aglow with love. The agonizing, terrifying love of something that I knew must be a god. My God. The lightless inferno of desolation, of pain and destruction. My tears of joy were nothing but steam. Nick's body didn't completely burn to ash. Of course not. There needed to be something to identify. After all, what does my god care about death? It was the destruction of his life that it hungered for. The agony and fear of his wife and child, those that loved him. So they had to know he was dead. Killed and mutilated in a pointless and unforeseeable act of unutterable violence. Then it was simply a matter of forging his signature on a few documents, implicating him in some very illegal transactions to get his assets stripped from him. Oh, and burning down the new house, of course. And with each act of glorious, hateful destruction, I felt my god's love embrace me, consume me, give me life. Any feelings of pity or mercy I might have had for the poor woman I fed from were cauterized. Julie's dead now, of course, though I do keep half an eye on their son Desmond, see if he has anything worth taking from him. At first I channeled this new energy into my job and my relationship. Gretchen and I had never been happier as I moved from one success to the next. I think she realized there was something else going on, though. Perhaps she suspected how much my mind drifted to Agnes when I held her in my arms. I know she wondered about how I started keeping petrol in the cupboard, and about my newfound love of scented candles, but she never asked, never even mentioned it. Perhaps on some level she knew as well as I did where we were headed, but there are some things you just have to accept that in the end they'll cause you pain. I should have been caught, really. For all that it gifted to me, my faith did little to hide my crimes, beyond ensuring they were scoured of physical evidence. And I know the police were investigating a possible serial murderer targeting people in my industry. But for whatever reason, they never gave me a second look. I later learned my new brothers and sisters of the Lightless Flame had taken it upon themselves to help hide my crimes. But even they are only human. Some of them, at least. I now know they were simply guiding me upon the path to my true epiphany. All this time I was serving my God, but only for my own glory. But with each new gift, each renewal of the fire, I saw how lifeless and hollow it was, how grey and ashen my existence had become. It became clear that where once I had destroyed to fuel my life, I now live for the pain that I caused. And for Agnes, my sweet, hopeless Agnes. And so I ended it. For all the agony and pain on Gretchen's face, she didn't seem surprised when I doused myself in kerosene and set it alight. I think she screamed. She must have screamed, but I couldn't hear it. As the heat warped my bones and bubbled my flesh, all I heard was the loving exultation of my God.
End recording.